So we have a coming together, listening, hearing, learning from one another, because we are the power and the strength of transformative action.
Um, so we are going to just jump in to our story, and the story is in the book, but we have a PowerPoint over here, which is about to be teed up, and is that good?
Yeah, that's
You want
yeah,
to test it?
that's good. I think they could hear me. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. While we're getting this teed up, oh, here it is. Here it is. I just want to say what an honor it's been to actually help organize this conference with the team that we did. Um, just an extraordinary experience, I have to say, to be working with people day in and day out, and then see, Earl, it's your word, fruition. See it come to fruition, right? And to just hear the gathering of all of these incredible voices, right? Um, I've learned so much already. And we offer our story as, not the model of reconciliation. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was haphazard. It was not well thought out. But I think the end point, or what we have developed in the last 7 years, has been really extraordinary. And it is always a privilege for me to be able to tell our story together. So thank you also.
Thank you.
Yeah. Shall we jump in?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank all y'all from coming out, spending time with us today. And I want to thank my family, my mom, my oldest sister Betty right here, my good friend Donald, and everybody that came to support what's going on here today. My name is Isaac Knapper, and I'm here today to present a story, a true story, something that happened, and something that I knew nothing of. And along with Dr. Amy Banks, she'll start it off, and then I'll kick in.
That sounds good. You ready?
So thank y'all for being here.
Yeah. So this is the place that we always start our story, and it really is the place, in some ways, where this story started, right? Which is, and I share that this in contrast, right? On the left, this is me in my heyday as a 17-year-old. Oh, Nancy. That's when my life peaked, right? When I was playing basketball. It's been downhill since then, not necessarily because of the trauma, but that was me playing basketball my senior year in high school. And on the right side, you see Isaac Knapper. He's in his boxing gloves. As I've got to know, as many of you know Isaac, he's a boxer. The kicker here is we're the same age, and he's in the Louisiana. He's already in Angola. Okay. And one of the things that just strikes me about these two coinciding pictures is that at this moment in time, neither one of us had committed a felony. Okay? Neither one of us had committed a felony. Isaac is sitting in prison where he would be for the next 13 years. And in those 13 years, I was able to live my life, right? Despite the trauma, I was able to go to college. I was able to go to medical school. I was able to do my residency. I was in the period of time that it took Isaac to get out of a wrongful conviction. I was able to do everything I wanted to do to come out on the other side as a physician. Okay? Sort of unfair point number one, and they're riddled in here. But again, here he is in his boxing gloves, basically fighting for his life. So let me back up a little further. April 12th, 1979, my father traveled to New Orleans. He was a professor at the University of Maine, Orono. I was born and raised in Maine, and it's important in this story to know that Maine was and is the whitest state in the country. And what that meant for my family and what that meant for this story is I did not have exposure to people of color, right? There was one in a class of 400 students in a school of 1,600. We had one black boy in our school. That was the sum total of our exposure to trauma. I mean, not to trauma, sorry, to any kind of, difference. And it really played out in our story, and I'll try to, say it as we go, but it really played out in our story because we, as, I think as Bill sort of pointed out early on, right? You can't be in this culture, in this racist culture without absorbing the racist messages that you get, right? And those were used actively in setting Isaac up to take the fall in my father's murder. So I woke up April 12th, 1979. My father went to dinner in the French Quarter. He, with a colleague, before the start of the conference, he walked back to the Hyatt Regency Hotel where he was staying. And just before they were able to make it into the door, they were held up with what was described as two young black men with a gun, held them up, just a routine robbery. My father protested, said, "You've got to be kidding," and he was shot point blank in the face and died on the spot. This is an image, and I really do just put that out there for visceral effect. This is my father being read his last rites on the streets of New Orleans. However, you can always also see in the right-hand corner of there's a detective, and it's a detective that is very familiar to corruption in Louisiana, John Dillman. He's been involved in numerous wrongful conviction cases, okay? Let's see where we are. So what happened to my family, right? We found out about the murder. A colleague, so my father was with a colleague. The colleague was pushed through the door, so he escaped. He was not harmed physically and was able to call home to some other colleagues who drove up from Orono to my house about 20 miles away to tell my mother. And to say that this was unleashed, I mean, for those of you who yesterday, I spoke a little bit of the trauma of that night and the preceding months and years and how this has gone on. But it was, hearing that your father has been murdered. I mean, it was just completely shattering to our family. And we didn't know the legal system, right? We hadn't been involved in the legal system. At the time, there were no victim advocates. So we had my father's body in New Orleans. We were up in Maine trying to figure out what the hell to do, right? What do you do with this? My mother's collapsed, and our family was in shambles. Almost immediately, we started hearing from detectives, and within about, I think it was about 3 weeks, Isaac, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This, no one told us, but this picture, this was my first introduction to Isaac Knapper, was this picture in the Bangor Daily News. It was our local newspaper. And from this moment on, what was fed to us was, at this point, I would say sort of stereotypes of young black men, right? They said, okay, we've picked up this guy, Isaac Knapper, with his accomplice, Leroy Williams. We are absolutely positive that he did this. They went through a litany of, he's an incredibly bad guy. He's been in trouble all his life. We've been trying to get him for the longest time. I mean, on and on and on. This is what we were told. And of course we believed it, right? We believed in whatever the justice system was supposed to be. So my family heard it. We're like, and it wasn't like we were, I don't remember, Nancy and I were talking about this last night, there wasn't necessarily a sense of outrage even about the murder. And I still, we still don't quite know what that was about. I think we were basically just in shock. Um, and I remember looking at you, Isaac, and sort of looking at his face and wondering, I wonder what happened in his life that made him do that. I mean, it's so interesting to listening to the voices around the, restorative justice and the questions that they ask, like why? Victims just want to know why. Why did you do that? And I remember thinking that about you and coming up with some storyline about why you would do that, which included nothing based on fact, right? But a lot based on, again, stereotypes that we learned, right? Oh, he was poor, he didn't have the support he needed, on and on and on, right? Not knowing that I was participating actually in the same racist stuff that kind of got you in this jam, right? So you want to talk about that picture?
Yeah, we speaking about racism and we speaks about systemic racism, and we know where it all arrived. And this, and I'm gonna get back to that. But this picture right here, that's Detective John Dillman. He was the detective that arrested me and woke me up with guns pointing in my face. And he all the way right now today, right now, this guy, he still feel like he had the right guy. He refused to admit to being wrong, like most of them. And I understand Dr. Amy and her family situation and how they felt. They don't know. They hear one side. And when you hear one side of a story, that's all you have to go on. You don't hear the other side, so all you can do is just go on what you heard until otherwise. And so what the situation is that these people was feeding Amy them stories about me, saying everything that they said was incorrect. First of all, they said I was this real big guy and I was weighing 100, at the time I was weighing 147 pounds. I was about 5'7", something like that. Well, anyway, they painted the picture that I was this real big old guy. They've been trying to get me. I'm a troublemaker. I've been in trouble all my life. I was one of the most dangerous juveniles in the state of Louisiana. So they paint these pictures. And so you're looking at people like Dr. Amy and her family. They don't know what's going on. They're only going off of what they heard. So I understand the way they felt, But my family, we went through it. My mom almost had a nervous breakdown. My sister, my brother was he just wanted to kill up the world. Everybody, my family was angry, and they was going through some of the same things that your father family went through, that Dr. Amy then went through. So, and it was one of those type situations. I believed in it, just like Amy, she believed that the system was right and that they was doing the right thing. On the other hand, I can't separate the two, but I believe that the system was doing the right thing, was going to do the right thing in the court, in the judiciary system. I'm thinking that, well, these judges, my mom would come see me. She was worried to death, scared to death. And, I'll tell my mom, it's going to be all right. They're going to find out. These people know what they're doing. They'll find out the truth and they'll let me go. I'll be home. But I was wrong. I'm talking about absolutely wrong. And if I've ever been wrong in my life, I was wrong. They would deny everything that we would present to the court. We would file for evidentiary hearing, which the judge goes back to that systemic racism. The judge said, get him out my courtroom. He should have been dead. Why they didn't kill him? That's what the judge said. And like any other judge, being a professional, if he gonna deny any kind of writ or habeas corpus, he's supposed to sign his signature. On my writ, he never did sign a signature. You know what he did with the writ when he looked at it? He tore it up and said, get him out my courtroom, send him back to the penitentiary for the rest of his life. That was the way he denied me. And that was Judge Shea. Mm-hmm. He's deceased now. And but my mom is a very religious lady. She's very spiritual, and she raised us to be the same way. So I don't hold no envy, and that's what this reconciliation comes in with me. I forgave everybody. I forgave the judge, the DA, the guy that beat me. They put me in the hospital. You know, I was on fourth floor in Charity Hospital as a juvenile, 16 years old. They broke my ribs. They had to operate on me. They took swollen glands, blood clots all out my body. They hid me in an area in a prison that was no longer being used. It was like a storage room. That was the seventh floor. They put me up there. It used to be isolation, but it had been shut down for about 10 years. And they had to pry the bars open with a crowbar to put me in there. They put me in there with nothing but rats and roaches and spider webs and left me in there cuffed up while I was broken. I couldn't breathe well because my ribs was messed up. And I was bleeding real bad. And my mom she came to visit me. They denied my mom from visiting me. That's in the hospital right there in Charity Hospital. My sister Hazel snapped that picture and they run her out of there. But anyway, my mom came to visit me. They wouldn't let my mom. They denied her visit. So my mom, the type of person, she's not going to take no for an answer. So she went to the chief. She went over their head, said, I want to see my son. Something is wrong. They're not letting me visit my son. So Chief Rudy, he took it personal. He brought my mom over there and made them go get me. And when they got me out of that cell that wasn't supposed to be used, he seen the condition I was in. And he brought me to the hospital personally in his car, brought me to Charity Hospital. And so that's where I was at. And they had to start an operation immediately because the blood that was bleeding inside my body. And these people, they call SIDs. When they would interrogate me, they would also, it was physical more, and it was mentally as well. But the physical part of it is that they was kicking me, stomping me, and they wouldn't touch my face. And me being a juvenile, being 16 years old, I had never been in that type situation. So I was like, they beat me, they kicking me, but they not touching my face. And when I went on a tear and I realized guys was telling me, oh, bro, you're a juvenile. They're not going to mess with your face. They just figure they could just stomp you and break you, do all that stuff to you, as long as they don't mess with your face, And that was the situation. But after getting out of the hospital, I stayed in the hospital about 8 or 9 weeks. And after getting out of the hospital, they sent me back to the county jail, which was the Orleans Parish prison. And they put me in a cell by myself at first for about 30 days. But every day they would come and get me to interrogate me. And when they put me on an open flat with other inmates, the inmates got so used to them coming to get me, to beat me, they would warn me when the people is at the door. They'll say, Nap, they coming to get you. They know that they was coming in there to get me, and I would try and put up a fight, but it wouldn't last long, because there was too many of them, and they would jump me until they get the cuffs on me, and they'll, struggle me out of there. Yeah. But Amy might want to say something about this.
So and one of the things that they tried to do, right, that I think you haven't mentioned, is they were trying to, because they knew they didn't have any information, right? They knew on some level that you didn't do this, actually, right. I think. But they didn't care. And so you're arrested, you're in the parish prison, you're being beaten, they're trying to force a confession out of you, right? Kind of playing Leroy Williams. And this is, there's so many kind of typical patterns that happen in these settings, right? So one of the things they were doing with Isaac and Leroy was going to Leroy and saying, okay, we know Isaac did this, we know you didn't do it, but if you testify against Isaac, you can get a lesser sentence. And then they're coming to Isaac and doing the same, right? So basically trying to, play one off the other to get somebody to confess, right? Now, meanwhile, up in Maine, what we're hearing over the summer, the trial, which was here in, this has become sort of you guys know the courthouse, but this has become sort of a place in my mind, because it was A, where you were held, B, where the trial was held, and C, where we ended up meeting you, right, in
Right.
Judge Lori White's office. But, you know, so what they were telling my family is, you know, unfortunately, we don't think we're going to be able to get a conviction. And they were saying this up until the, you know, almost a couple of weeks before the trial. And what they were saying to us was, we know he did it, so they weren't going to back down off that. But what they were saying is that the one witness that they had was that has gone missing. So they didn't have they didn't have a witness. And then literally all of a sudden, I want to say it was a week, I don't know how long it was exactly, but all of a sudden we get a call saying, oh, great news, we're sure we're going to get a conviction, because, you know, one of the arrested guys has decided to turn state's evidence and basically say you did it, right? And so we're like, oh, good, you know. And again, not questioning it, just not knowing what's going on down there, just assuming, okay, finally one of these guys confessed. And so in October, my brother and my uncle went to the trial. We all expected that it would be, you know, I thought a week, you know, when I got that out of TV, I completely made that up. And so we were absolutely shocked to find that the trial lasted one day. So the trial for Isaac's life was one day long. And in that time, they convicted him of first-degree murder, despite testimony from family members that he was there, that he was at home, despite the testimony from a security guard that was literally coming down the Hyatt Regency stairs around the time of the murder and felt like she had gotten a good look at the murderer, and that murderer was not Isaac. So there were, you know, there were reasonable testimonies, right, that completely got thrown out because Leroy Williams testified against Isaac. You want to say, kind of add your 2 cents worth about the trial?
Yeah. You know, about the trial with Leroy Williams, when the people came to do the interrogation, they came to me first and they said, we know that you did not commit this murder, but we need you to sign these papers saying that Leroy Williams did it. And I told them, I said, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. They said, okay, you're not going to do it? Well, if you don't do it, we'll go to Leroy Williams because we're going to get a conviction one way or another. If you don't do it, we know you didn't commit the murder. So you right now, you can have a chance. You have a chance to possibly go home or just get a lighter sentence where you'll see your family again. Say, but if you don't sign these papers, we're going to get Leroy to do it. And we believe Leroy will do it. But we're giving you the option first because we believe you're innocent. We believe you didn't do it. I said, well, if you believe I didn't do it, why are you going to Leroy? And, you know, well, I refuse. They threatened me with the death sentence. They even went to my mother. They told my mother, said, if you want to see your son live, you need to try and talk to him. Get him to sign these papers stating that Leroy Williams, because we believe everything fits Leroy Williams. We believe he committed the murder. And so my mom was so scared, she just wanted to see her son live. You know, she didn't want to see me die because they kept saying they was going to give me the electric chair. We know that the legal injection wasn't out then. It was the electric chair. And they just kept throwing that in my mom's face. And you know, and like any parent, she was worried and she was scared. So my mom came visit me. They sent her in there to visit me on a special visit. And my mom said, Jerry, she calls me Jerry. She said, Jerry, these people are trying to kill you. I believe you're innocent. I believe you didn't do it. But to save your life, you probably need to just say, Leroy, or just plead guilty to 40 years. They offering you 40 years. I said, Mama, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to plead guilty to something I didn't do this. I don't know anything about it. And so, but my mom was scared. So I understand how she felt. Like any parent, you don't want to see your kid die in the electric chair, you know? So, but I told my mom, I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to plead guilty to something I don't know anything about that. And I don't know why. If Leroy wanted to testify and admit to it, and he want to testify and say I did it, let him, fine. You know, I didn't do it, and I'm not going to say I did it. And so they went to Leroy Williams, and they told Leroy the same thing. They said, look, if you sign these papers stating that Isaac Knapper committed this crime, you'll go home. You'll get a life sentence. and they didn't have to ask him twice. He signed the papers, and he turned state's evidence on me. He testified, and with his head down, never looked me in the eyes because he knew that he was lying. And I don't know why. Right now today, I'm still curious, and I'll probably never know the truth because, from what I understand, he's supposed to be deceased too. And but it would probably never leave. And I guess that's part of the trauma. Whereas, it would always be on my mind. I would think about it all the time. Why did he do that? Why did he lie on me? Did these people force him to do that? Or did he do it just because he was afraid? And this was a high profile case. Now, understand what I'm saying. We had a witness, a guy named a guy named Ricky Gordon. Ricky Gordon was coming. He called my mother and he told my mother, he said, I know who committed that crime that Jerry is locked up for, and I know that he didn't do it. So my mom, called herself trying to find out what's going on. So she called Leroy Williams' mom because he was locked up too and said, well, Ricky called me and said that he know that my son didn't commit that crime. The very same day my mom made that call to let Leroy Williams' mother know that Ricky Gordon was going to be a witness, she told her other son, Jackie Williams, which is Leroy Williams' brother. She told Jackie Williams that Ricky gonna testify that Isaac didn't commit that crime. The very same day, Jackie Williams went out there and killed Ricky, shot him in the chest. He fell in his brother's arms to keep him from testifying that I didn't commit that crime. So all these things make me wonder if Jackie had something to do with it. And we'll get to that later when these other three guys got arrested. Derek Robinson was one of them, with the gun, with the murder weapon that killed Dr. Banks. It was a 6-shot gun, takes 6 bullets. It had 5 in it when they arrested these guys in the same area, not even a block away from where Dr. Banks was killed. They got arrested with the gun with 1 bullet missing. And the bullet that was missing was the bullet that they found in Dr. Banks' head. But those 3 guys got cut loose. We never knew why. And I didn't find that out till like 11 years later when I got the investigator report, when my mom obtained that report that we needed.
Yeah. So you're convicted in a 1-day trial.
Yes.
Right? My family, was okay. Justice has been served, right? At the same time, I remember one of the things that always stayed with me, and it just stuck sort of in my heart, in my chest, in my throat somewhere, was my brother describing the horror, actually, that your family went through when the verdict was read. Right. And, at the time, again, how do you make sense of that? But I remember him saying, oh, my God, they were, there was wailing. And, as a 17-year-old, I'm caught between, oh, my God, feeling for this family and confused, and my father's dead. And, just you can imagine the swirling that's going on. But that has been something, that just always stayed with me. And of course, through the years and most recently meeting this family who was there and that this happened for, the grief, the power of that is just, it's just horrendous, right? God. I want to show a couple of slides here. We put these in because I think it's really important that we stop talking about bad actors, right? And again, stay with the systems. There's been so much kind of naming, almost everybody names, it's the systems that are broken, but it's the systems that are set up and operating the way that they were designed to operate, right? That's right. The white supremacist systems that are in place in the legal system that are operating the way that they are supposed to operate, right? Harry Connick Sr. was I can't remember, is he still alive or not? One of the more offensive fellows I've ever read about. But you can see and hear. Here he was getting called out. And, the number of people that have actually even been in the conference been at this conference who were wrongly convicted under Harry Connick Sr.'s reign of terror is profound, right? So this is an exchange that he had with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He says, my reputation is based on something other than, I can barely read it, than a case or two cases or five cases or one interception. I'm just going to stand up. One interception or 20 interceptions. Like, who goes into football at this freaking point? Look at the rest of my record. I have more yards than anybody, Connick said. Would you make it the legacy of Hank Aaron or Babe Ruth that they struck out a lot? He went on, I have to look at myself and say, this is who I am. This is what I've done. Perfect. No. But I've done nothing to go to confession about in that office at all. Right? Accountability, right? Where is it? So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, there was literally a petition filed, and that Connick's office was deliberately indifferent to Brady material, which is, as most of you know, material that you need to turn over to the defense in order to make the justice system fair, right? So she said, she wrote that the office's instruction on Brady and similar court rulings amounted to little more than 4 sentences in a manual, that Connick himself misunderstood the law, and that his cavalier attitude spurred a culture of inattention to defendants' rights. Okay? And this is his response. To suggest a criminal lawyer in my office didn't know of their obligation to turn over Brady material is absurd. Knowing it and doing it are two separate things. It's such a naive statement, Connick says. I can't attribute malice to those decisions as some people do, as the dissenters in the Supreme Court do, particularly Ginsburg. It reaches a level of hysteria. What's burning in that woman is a very liberal flame that doesn't contemplate the whole picture. Right? That's what we're up against. That's what Isaac was up against. That's what my family was up against, trying to get any kind of, quote, justice around this murder, right? You what? Right? Yeah. So Isaac went to Angola. Do you want to say a little bit? We have a few slides about Angola.
Yeah.
Many of you, I know it well.
Yeah, the speaker that spoke right before we did, he mentioned about the field, picking cotton and everything in Angola, and that's what we did in the field, along with my friend right here, Pug, Earl Trouvier, who started this, and Fox sitting in the back there, Archie Williams, Michael Johnson. The list just goes on and on. We got quite a few of us that's in here right now. That was in Angola, doing this same thing. Geechee right there, we did everything. The Angola was, I think, 24,000 acres of misery, and it's self-contained. What I mean by that they don't go outside the gate for anything. They grow their own vegetables, any kind of food that you can grow out the soil. Angola grows it. So they don't go outside the gate for anything. It's modern slavery. When they flee, when the slaves was freed in 1816, and when they was freed, that's when they opened up the prisons. All right, they built all these prisons and opened up the prisons just to bring it back, but they brought it back modern, and it's called modern slavery. And that's what a guy was speaking about, the 4 cents. We was getting 2 cents, huh, Buck? He did good. He was getting 4. He came a little later than us. Yeah, so we was getting 2 cents an hour. And I think he said his salary for 20-something years was like, he got, how much did he say he got? It wasn't over $5. I know that. Yeah. Well, mine's for the time I worked in the field for over 11 years because I couldn't get 90 days in without a write-up. But I think when I left, it has this thing where they give you a penny, they put a penny in your account, and they put a penny in your savings account, that you can't spend till you go home. Most guys serving a life sentence probably never go home, but they can't spend it. And the money I had saved up from working in the field, After 13 years I was there, I think I had about maybe $13, you know. Yeah. So that field is cruel and unusual punishment. A lot of convicts, they couldn't handle working in the field. The only way you would be able to come out of the field, sometime it would be 110 degrees and nothing but sun. We call it the desert because we didn't have no shade. And we would be out there working, and some of the guys would pass out, but they would get locked up for passing out. They don't bring them to the hospital, they bring them to the dungeon. They put them in a hole, saying that they just lazy and refusing to work. And these guys is foaming by the mouth and everything. So that's the way we was being treated. That's why I said modern slavery. And also, the only way we would go in, a horse would have to fall out. They rode horses. Oh, you see the horse right here? That's the COs, the deputies. They rode horses. And if one of them horses pass out, that's when they'll take us in. But if we didn't, it didn't matter about a human being. The horse pass out, it's time to go in. So that's what we was up against.
Yeah. So, and imagine for those of you who are actually here, Friday night, imagine you're a 16-year-old boy, you're a 17-year-old boy, right? Your brain is literally still developing, right? And so, this formative period of time, right? You are basically fighting for your life.
Yeah.
Literally fighting for your life. And I mean, I say this for every single man that was in Angola, right? I mean, the level of trauma that was that you were subject to, right, was profound. I mean, you want to share a little bit about the?
Yeah, that's the weapons right there. That's the kind of weapons that was being used in Angola, and it was one of the things. Angola was known as the bloodiest penitentiary in America, and at this time, I'm thrown in there with wolves, and I just turned 17 years old. So of course I was very young, but tough, and still is. I'll always be tough because my mom, yeah, she taught me to be tough. My mom told me when she come visit me, she said, I raised a boy. Stay a boy, become a man, but don't be anything else. Because all of us was hearing about the stories about Angola, how they raping these young men and turning them into Maytags, making them out of other slaves, to wash other inmate drawers and underwears and stuff like this here, So I wasn't going to become one of them. I had no doubt in my mind about that, no matter how nervous, afraid, or how wrong they were by putting me in there. I was definitely going to become a real killer if one of them ever tried and mess with my manhood. So I didn't have no doubt about myself when it comes to that. But these weapons right here was like you had the weapon of choice. And if you notice on this thing here, you may see something look like guns. And that's what they were. They were zip guns that some of the inmates made. And one thing about Angola, you meet some people there, they are so, it's almost like, in I'll use Burrow in a little while, the guy who helped worked on my case. He was like a Johnny Cochran, but he was serving 198 years. But these guys know how to improvise, and they would make zip guns that you can actually shoot a person. One inmate got his leg shot off by another inmate, So, and these wasn't guns that was brought into prison. These was guns that was made in a prison by inmates, So they know how to improvise. They know how to do whatever it took, to survive. And when you walked in that place at this time, that's one of the things you had to have. You had to have a weapon, because if you was walking around without a weapon, wow. And so you needed a weapon. And I was fortunate not just to have a weapon, but knew how to fight if I didn't have a weapon, So, and I thank God for my mom sending me to boxing school early.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you want to speak about Lori.
Well, many of you saw Lori yesterday in all her glory. That's the kind of Lori you want on your side, right? And here's an image of Lori. So you're there in 1979 to 1990 when things started shifting.
Right.
You met Lori. So maybe just describe the process. I'm trying to see what is next. Yeah, the process of Lori Brocane, how you began to untangle the knot, because you really thought, I'm here for the rest of my life.
Oh, my mom never missed a Friday visiting me in prison the whole time I was in Angola. In fact, the inmates made a platter award for her being Mother of the Century, because I'm gonna tell you this story right quick. It was snowing in 1982. It was snowing, and we never get snow down here, but it was snowing in 1982. So they shut this snake road down. They have this area when you come off the main road to go to Angola. As soon as you turn off that main road, now you're on a snake road. And the snake road, it goes like that all the way for like 20 about what, Pug, 22 miles? Yeah, it goes like that until you get to the front gate. And that road right now is paved now. It's like a blacktop, but it wasn't like that back then. It was a dirt road, and it was easy to get yourself hurt bad, especially if the ground is wet or damp or anything, because it turned into mud and caused a slip. And so 1982, it was snowing real hard. They shut the road down. They put a roadblock there to keep people from coming on that snake road because it was too dangerous. And they told us we wasn't allowed to have visits because of that. They didn't shut the visiting shed down and everything. And it was about 11:30 or 11:45, I heard my name on a loudspeaker. He said, Isaac Knapper, you got a visit. So I said, visit? Everything is shut down. Everything is closed. And so I went up there. One person sitting in the visiting room, and it was my mama. I said, Mama, how you get in here? What you doing? They done shut everything down. My mom said, I got out the car and I moved that thing out the road because I wasn't going to let it stop me from coming to see you. Yeah. Yeah. And so, so the whole time, a mother's love is everything, and family love is everything. And that's why I'm so family orientated, because that's how I was raised. And I'm very spiritual because my mom always, it's not a time she didn't come and tell me, Jerry, I seen it. The Lord showed it to me. Just keep praying, And I'd say it now. I used to lie to my mom and say, yeah, I've been praying. But I didn't, yeah. And because it was no time for praying. I was too busy trying to protect myself and continue to be a man, because at one point in my life in Angola, I had given up. I felt like they was denying all my writs. Everything that was being filed was getting denied. And so I said, they're not going to let me out of here. I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. And so I started living like my man Pug, like a barbarian, And I hate to put you on the spot like that, Pug, but, yeah. And I was glad to see him make a transformation, with his life, and started getting into some constructive things and started trying to get home because he innocent also. But it's a lot. It's some things that, some things that it will kind of put your mind in another place. Like, well, they put me in here with these lions. I'm finna become a tiger. Yeah. And so you have to live as though you're the environment that you part of. Say something, Pug. Yeah, they locked me, Pug. We got locked up in a hole. Innocent again. Innocent again. I think I was telling y'all in the back about the thing with Wood Fox, and everybody heard of Wood Fox, part of his organization. And Hakeem, that was here yesterday. He did 42 years in Angola. My partner Michael did 42 years in Angola. That's here, But anyway, they locked us up. Me and Pug, I think we was the only two that was really innocent. Yeah. And they come got us. I had just got there. I was still wet behind the ears. They call that wet behind the ears when you just come into prison, you know. And if you've been there 20 years, you're still wet behind the ears to some of those guys. Yeah, because they've been there 40, 50, 55 years. But anyway, they come locked us up, and I think they sent Pug to Camp J. They sent me to CCR, you know, and they accused us as taking over the prison. They said we was about to take over the prison. They said we had maps of the prison to escape. You know, they said we had all the weapons, and they had all kind of things on the report. And one of the guys stood up to let the lieutenant know, look, you need to let that youngster go. He ain't got nothing, he just got here. Because they found 27 shotgun shells in my cell that was in my mattress, a bunk that I slept on for about maybe 16 hours. They just put me in a cell, and they came to the cell to search the cell, and they busted open and found 27 shotgun shells. And they found a shotgun that wasn't in the cell block where I was, but they found a shotgun in the gym. And that's what I was being accused of. And just got to the prison. Hadn't been there 24 hours yet. You know. And they accused me of taking over, about to say we was about to form an organization and we was about to take over the prison. And I stayed at Camp J. I stayed on lockdown, CCR and Camp J. I stayed on lockdown for about 2 years for that.
How about that? Everybody take a deep breath on that one. So as the story is going along, right, somewhere in around 90, two things happen. You start hearing from Burl Carter, right, who is a jailhouse lawyer. And at the same time, he started sort of looking at your case and really believed that you were innocent, right?
Yeah.
And around the same time, I guess Lori White came on. You hired her. True?
Yeah.
Lori White came, and this confluence of people, I guess Burl Carter said, hey, you need to get the police report, right? And nobody had heard about the police report. And this is one of the places I have to say that I get most enraged about as the victim's family, right? Is the police report that Clara Lee was able to get, right, that was never turned over. It's called the Dillman report now. It was never turned over to the defense. And what was in it was a paragraph from a Sergeant Italiano that about 1 week after my father's murder, he had arrested 3 young men, okay, that fit the description of the guys that were involved in killing my father, including one that had a white sailor hat, right? So it wasn't completely like, just on a baseball cap or whatever. A white sailor hat. As Isaac said, they had the murder weapon with 1 bullet missing that was the bullet that ballistically tested to the same bullet that killed my father. They had the murder weapon, right? They fit the description. They had a murder weapon, and that was in the police report, and that was ignored. Right? Ignored. And, right, when through some complicated measures, you were able to finally get this in front of a judge other than Judge Shea, you know, they let you go,
Yeah.
right?
You know, my mom, again, you know, she's, like I said, the kind of person that she won't take no for an answer. And when Burl, this is the guy he was a jailhouse lawyer, inmate counselor, like Pug. And he was into the law, helping a lot of people, and he was serving 198 years. So he looked at my case, and when he read about 50 pages of it, and he told me, he called me Red. He said, Red, you don't belong sitting here, bro. He said, I can see this. You innocent. And I said, yeah, man, you know it now. I know it. I said, but who is us? We need the judge to know it. And he said, and the judge gonna know it. He said, we need one thing to prove your innocence. He said, if I can get hold to that investigator police report, I can prove your innocence. And so I jumped on the phone. I called my mom. My mom come visit me. And I told my mother, I said, Mom, is it any kind of way you think you can get hold to the police report on my case? Mom said, I don't know, but I'm going to try. In less than 3 days, I called home. My mom said, I got the police report. And she mailed it out, and nobody else could get it. Lawyers couldn't get it. Nobody, I don't know, right now today, I still don't know how my mom got to that report. But nobody else could get that report. And my mom got that report.
You hear what I say?
Yeah.
Came
my
from
mom,
above.
yeah.
Yep.
When she got that report and mailed it out there to me, I went to Borough because I wasn't familiar with the law. I wasn't even studying law. My brother was. But anyway, when I gave the report to Borough and he looked at it, Borough jumped about that high. He jumped, he said, Red, I told you, I know you're going home. And I didn't know what he was talking about. He had just read, I know he just read the police report, so he read something that's going to verify what he's saying. And when he said, Red, I need you to read this. And I was so nervous. I said, no, bro, you just explain to me what's going on. I don't want to read it because I'm not going to understand it anyway. He said, no, I need you to read this because he wanted me to see that a good friend of mine was the one got caught with the murder weapon. And all the time that me and Derek Robinson was there together, he never, ever told me about that. I never knew. He became my good friend, my boxing buddy and everything. And he never told me, but he would always tell me, periodically, he would say, bruh, you're going to get out one day because you're innocent. And he would always tell me that, but I never knew why he'd say that. I never knew he was the one got caught with the murder weapon. He never told me that. And so when I got that police report and when I seen his name, Derek Robinson and Samuel Washington, and I read these guys, Jeffrey Zimmerman, these 3 guys that got caught with the murder weapon and everything. And I said, wow. And now, but at the time, Derek was on lockdown. He was at jail, so I was in general population, so I couldn't see Derek. I had no way of getting in contact, but I wanted to see him so bad, to say, man, that's why you say I'm innocent. I see why but Derek wound up losing his life. He died before I could let him know that I knew that he was the one that got caught with that murder weapon. And that's one of the reasons he used to always tell me that he knew I was innocent,
So Isaac then is released, which is, certainly a happy part of the story. On my end, on our family's end, nobody told us. So this is 1992. At that time, my mother was still alive, and nobody told us, literally. So we went on for another 13 years, thinking that, justice had been served, that Isaac Knapper was in prison, and, that's what happened, basically trying to piece our lives back together, which was no easy feat, actually, until about 2004. That's Nancy there. You've seen her here. Nancy was 8 at the time of the murder, and at the time that we found out, her husband actually literally Googled Isaac Knapper's name, and all of a sudden, he did it on a whim, and all of a sudden, all of this information pops up because now we're into the internet age, right? Now we're in internet, and all of this information about Isaac being released from prison, the wrongful conviction, the Dillman report. I mean, so all of a sudden, this is all just dumped, oh my God, right? And, I described this yesterday a little bit. It's hard to describe how disorienting, re-traumatizing that was, and, I have to say, I didn't feel any animosity at all towards Isaac at this point. I mean, where I went to, the storyline was so convincing, right? And by this time, both Nancy and I are very interested in issues around social justice. So the storyline of a young Black man being picked up for a murder and railroaded was sadly very familiar, right? But part of what continued to just be haunting to me was that all of a sudden, my family tragedy was just a mess, right? And it there's no two ways about it. It was a mess. It was horrible. Our family was fractured. My sister moved to Europe. I mean, many things ended up happening. But all of a sudden now, that pain was just exponentially worse because I now could picture this young boy who had been railroaded, right? So now, and it's interesting as we've talked about reconciliation, and the humanity of it, right? Isaac was an abstract person to me when I first heard about him, right? He was this amorphous young black man who killed my father, and I didn't know much more about him than that. And so all of a sudden, there are these articles in the paper about his heart and his humanity and what had been done to him and his family and, the aftermath. And, that was really the beginning for me of, what do you do with this, right? Because, I said it yesterday, the only thing worse than having a parent murdered or a family member murdered is having somebody wrongly convicted for it, right? Now I'm imagining he's got a whole family that was in a community that was traumatized by this, right? So Nancy, at the time, was getting her PhD at Columbia, and and I had two young kids, and she really took the lead in trying to get anybody down here in New Orleans interested. She called the police department, she called the prosecutors, she called victims advocates, right? And, nobody could get us any records, and though I guess, Nancy, my sense is nobody was mean about it, but we were a drop in the bucket. Do you know what I mean? Of what was going on. And so, really nothing was going to happen. And so finally, 2005 rolled around, and a couple of things happened, right? One was Hurricane Katrina hit down here. And, I think at that time, at least Nancy and I just assumed, I remember literally talking about, oh, I'm sure the records, any records that might be available are just now destroyed, right? The whole city is destroyed. And then sadly, after my mother passed away in 1998 of ovarian cancer, and I found out that I had ovarian cancer. So, all of a sudden our whole, it felt like the family energy shifted to, okay, we got to deal with cancer. We've got to drop this, right? And that's where things stood for 10 years. And this is a picture of my twins when they were the age that Isaac and I were when my father was murdered and Isaac went to prison. What was happening for me, and this for anybody who knows trauma, one of the things that as a trauma psychiatrist, as a person that specializes in that, I was well aware of, is that when your kids turn the age that you were when a traumatic event happens, it often really stirs that up in you, right? And so in the summer of 2015, I was really a mess, I have to say. My kids were about to turn 17. And, the way I described it is I couldn't look at them without seeing my own vulnerability and even Isaac's vulnerability. Like this, they were babies, for God's sakes. We were babies when this happened, right? And so I sort of just was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'd like to say that I thought of the word reconciliation. I didn't. I just was sort of like, I got to do something. And on an absolute whim, I was in Pennsylvania on vacation. And one night I just was like, I'm going to reach out to Lori White. I don't know where she is. I only knew that she was, she had been your lawyer. And so I sent a very nondescript, I sent an email introducing myself as the, daughter of Dr. Ronald Banks and, that she had worked on Isaac Snapper's case. And I sent it to, honest to God, this judge at blah, 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 blah. It was very nondescript. I thought, I'm never going to hear back, but I sent it off. And I was absolutely shocked that she responded within about 12 hours. I got an email back from her. And it began a conversation over email where, I can't even, she's so funny, but one of the things you have to know about Lori, and if you read the book, I mean, you'll see. I mean, the heart that she brought to you, to your life, the care that she had for you, and I think a lot of guys that she's represented was just extraordinary. And that was the care I felt like she then showed me. Really was thoughtful, was respectful. That it was such a loss for your family, and how is everybody doing? I mean, she was just so generous. It made it very easy. And again, you think about the reconciliation process, right? I'm taking a deep dive into like my worst pain, and Lori was there, and she was the first one to sort of catch me, right? And sort of say, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm worried that you're angry at me for getting Isaac off. And it allowed me to say to her, no, I'm not. We've read, I think I believe that he's innocent. So we were able to have just that dialogue. We had a phone conversation, and somewhere in there, it occurred to me that I wanted to try to meet Isaac. And actually, I had realized that ever since I saw you, that picture of you, I've always wanted to meet you. And again, it was to ask. I think way back then, it was to ask that question: why? Why did you do this? And then it morphed into, I, I just need to meet you. And again, I couldn't exactly explain why. And so Lori set up a meeting for us. In between, before we actually met, she sent this picture, and she said, I remember saying to me, you might think Isaac looks a little intimidating, he's a big guy. And, when I got this picture, all I could focus on was his eyes. And sort of, like it's still sort of like a gentleness, a kindness, and it was so kind of, there was nothing in it that felt intimidating, like his shirt, like yellow, you know what I mean? And again, these are the, when we're talking about reconciliation, these are the little pieces of how did I feel safe, right? To be able to go there. And there's Isaac and Clara Lee there. We've got that picture. And so in 2015, December of 2015, Nancy and I got on a plane and flew to New Orleans to meet Isaac and his wife, Denise, who is there. There's a picture here. Denise, don't want to cut you out. Do not ask me what Lori White was doing with the bunny. Okay? Let's just say. We met in Judge White's office. Do you want to say a little bit of what it was even like for you to hear that we wanted to meet?
Yeah. When Lori called me, I don't never call her Judge Lori. I always call her Lori. And she told me one time, she said, because I called the judge one time. I said, Judge Lori. She said, Isaac, what do you call? You call me Judge. I said, well, you are a judge. She said, you never call me Judge. You just call me Lori. And she said, don't ever do that again. Call me Lori like you've been doing. She said, because judge is for people that I'm not friends with. You my friend. So you call me Lori. And I always call her Lori. Well, anyway, Lori called me and she said, I just got a call from Dr. Amy Banks, and she and her family would like to meet you. That was the guy that you was accused of murdering. That's his daughter. And she said, but don't answer it right now. You don't have to answer it now. I said, wait a week, wait 2 weeks. Take your time. You don't have to answer it right now. And I was just kind of thinking at the time, why would they want to meet me? But before, maybe about 10 minutes, we had been on the phone. And before she hung up, I told her, I said, yeah, I don't mind meeting them if it would help. So she said, you sure? I said, yeah, I'm positive. And so she said, well, I'll schedule a meeting and you'll get a chance to meet Dr. Banks. Her and her sister Nancy may be flying down here. So when y'all flew down here, I think Lori called me and she said they're here. And so me and my wife, we got ready. We got in the car and we went down to the judge chambers. And we went in the judge chambers, and I walked in there and I looked at Nancy, I looked at Dr. Nancy, and I looked at Dr. Banks. And it was kind of strange and it was kind of weird, but I felt like a relief because I wanted to meet, I just wanted to meet Nancy because I had read in the newspaper that Dr. Banks had an 8-year-old daughter when he was killed. So I just wanted to have this opportunity to at least hoping that I can just get a hug from Nancy. And it just stayed on my mind. And so when we were standing there and we started talking, I was telling Amy and Nancy what went on in my life and during my incarceration and everything. And I looked at Nancy and she had her head down. And when she raised her head a little bit, I can see that she had been tear-eyed. So I asked her for a hug. And we got up, stood up and hugged each other. And when we hugged each other, it was like tears started falling from everybody. And I think when we talk about the healing process, that's where it started at with me because I had been damaged. Yeah. And so that's what the healing when I embraced Nancy, something that is just I felt it. I felt it. I just how you have that body heat and me hugging her and she's hugging me and we just standing there in the middle of the judge chambers, and I looked over at my wife. She was tear-eyed. And I looked at Amy and Lori. Lori, Lori gonna cry anyway. And so everybody was just tear-eyed. And it was a moment that the healing process began for me. And that's where I started healing at when I touched her, when I touched Nancy, that's when my healing started.
Yeah. It was really the most profound moment, I think, of my life. To witness that. And, we talk about reconciliation and what happens, and this is, of course, a subset of reconciliation. But again, it was so much about humanity, right? It was when we sat there, with Isaac and Denise, and they're across from us, and Nancy and I are here, and Lori's kind of off to the side. And Isaac begins to tell us actually what he has been through, right? We didn't know, the newspapers didn't report that he had been beaten, either that they tried to beat a confession out of him, that he had been, his life was in danger, the conditions in Angola. We didn't know any of that. And so he's telling us these stories, right? And, which was so emotional in and of itself, right? You can't believe that human beings would treat another human being this way. I mean, you can, because of course we live in this world, but, and then to have that moment where, where Denise had said, how was it for you? And to see the utter kindness and connection that you were capable of, right? It was sort of like, I felt like in that meeting, we really saw your heart, right? And all, that was, that moment of all of the bad mouthing, I mean, the contrast between what we were told about Isaac Knapper and what the reality was, right? Was just so stark and so horrific. And even to this day, so enraging, right? You know, but to see this humanity and, the two of you hugging, I mean, it was really just profound, right? Um, you know, we've gone on quite a long time. I want to say Isaac and I, obviously wrote the book together over a couple of years. We now have had just the most amazing experience traveling around, talking with folks. I think I want to read, rather than going through kind of many more pictures, and I'm happy to at some point. I just want to read the end which I think captures a lot of um, kind of the essence of what our time together was, and then maybe just open it up to questions if that's okay. All right. Um, so part of that remarkable weekend was actually going to Angola prison with Isaac, with Lori White, and being able to meet some of your friends. I mean, I just will never forget going from, in the van from this place to this place. And, you were clearly held in such high esteem, even here now, 30 years later. And, but also the fact that there were guys still there that knew you from 30 years before, right? I mean, ugh. Um, and so on the way back, Nancy and we were headed to the airport, and Denise and Isaac offered to give us a ride. And so I just read a couple of paragraphs here. When the tour ended, Denise and Isaac offered to drive Nancy and me to the airport for a flight back to New York. During the 2-hour trip, we talked nonstop with Isaac, sharing one story after another. He's a great storyteller, if you haven't noticed. Every one of his ended with a friend or family member dead. His stories weren't designed to elicit sympathy or concern from us. He was simply sharing the facts of his life. As I listened, it dawned on me that it was nothing short of a miracle that he was still alive, and I was filled with gratitude that I had been able to meet him in person. I didn't yet know how my life would change or how I might grow from this experience, but I was aware of how seminal it felt and what a gift it already was. Isaac finally pulled his Lexus up to the curb outside the airport, then helped us carry our bags into the terminal. I was surprised by the emotion I felt, by the connection to this man who had been in my life for some 36 years. It seemed impossible to let go, to move forward with no clear plan for how to maintain this connection, unsure of what the impact had been on him, but knowing clearly that this had changed me, that it had healed me at the very center of my being. We hugged once, twice, 3 times, and when we finally parted, I could see in his eyes that he, too, was having a hard time saying goodbye. As a parting gift, he said simply, "It feels like I'm saying goodbye to family." And at that moment, I knew that would be okay, that we wouldn't lose each other because we had both lost so much already in ways over which we had no control. Family. It's such a simple word that describes a built-in sense of belonging. Some families you're born into, others you choose, and still others, in rare cases, you're thrust into. Our lives, so disparate in every way, blew up together on April 12th, 1979. And in many ways, we've all been spiraling out of control, fighting to steady ourselves against the power of that explosion. And finally, through the years, through the pain, through the losses, as our lives whirled by each other's, we reached out a hand, touched each other, and simply held on. And we're still holding on. Questions? Thank you for listening.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you both for sharing your story. I think I'm sure you had to go into the depths of your heart to be able to share this with a room full of people that you don't know. So just thank you for doing that over and over. Um, I can't help but be struck by um, like frustration and anger being my primary emotion hearing y'all's story. And as you mentioned, it is the systemic anger. I think I've struggled a lot over the last couple years to try and um, talk to people or help people understand that this isn't about one person or one case or one situation, but it's about like the racist history of this country. And as you mentioned, all the actors and district attorneys, police officers, all the people who were involved. So my question for both of you is, what advice do you two have, or just how do you begin to personally reconcile with the hurt that the criminal legal system has caused both of you and your families? Like, what advice do you have for reconciling with that?
do you want to start? Do you want me to?
You can start.
Okay, I can start. Um, I think you have to have people. Um, you know, all of us, black, white, everybody is subject, just as Bill had said, we are subject to a racist country and racism all over the place, right? So how do I cope with that? Partly I cope with it by doing things like this, right? By building alliances with people that are like-minded, that want to try to question the system, that want to try to push back against the system. I think for me as a white person, I want to be more and more and more vocal. Okay. One of the things I said this yesterday, folks might not have been here. One of the things that was important to me, and I think to Nancy as well when we came down here, was to talk to the prosecutor, Dave Pattison, who was one of the prosecutors in this case. And I wanted to give him a chance. I actually really did. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I purposely deceived him. I lied, or I admitted the fact that we had already met Isaac, that we believed in his innocence. But I really wanted to know what his stance was going to be. And he was offensive. He was obnoxious. He was very kind. He was very protective of Nancy and I, but it was the same Nancy. He was protective in that way that white people in power can be protective, right? Like, here, let's take you to a nice hotel and I'll tell you my story, if you think you want to hear it. But I wanted to question him. So I asked him, how do he said point blank, I'm sure still to this day, Isaac did it, you know, and right then and there he lost me, but I wanted to push back. So we went through a few things. Okay, you're saying he was this big guy. He wasn't. I pulled out the picture. This is not a big guy, and immediately he says, well, compared to Leroy Williams, he was a big guy. And I said, well, what about the fact, why, the Brady material? What about the fact that the gun was in these other guys' hands? How do you make sense of that? Why wasn't that followed up on? And his answer, the facilness with which he answered things, it was, these people or these guys would pass guns around all the time. That was the answer. I'm trying to think what the third, there were a number of things I did. So I basically calling him out on that. But I think, I think what I do with the anger, and I do that, if there's any anger that I have, it's for that. It's for the system. It's for Harry Connick Sr. It's for, not individuals, but it's the folks that have set up these system and keep them in place. And I think finding places that you can take a stand, not alone ever, right? But in alliances. How about you?
Yeah, it's correct what you were saying. But I believe that if you hold anger in your heart, you're hurting yourself. You're not hurting the person that you're angry with. They don't feel a thing. And so, in order to protect your heart and save your soul, you have, like what we doing, forgive. So with Detective John Dillman, Dave Patterson, even Harry Connick, all those guys, if they are still living, I would like to be able to see them, to tell them I forgive them for what they did. Yeah, because I'm not gonna hold that in my heart. It's not hurting them with me holding it in my heart. So even Leroy Williams, if he's still living, I would like to, man, I forgive you. If you don't want to explain to me why you did what you did, you don't have to. You don't have to. I forgive you anyway. It's over with. Because I'm not going to continue to carry that, because it's hurt me carrying it. And for me to save myself and save my soul, I'll just let it go and apologize to them for something I didn't do.
And I'm not at that stage. I haven't forgiven these people, actually. It's something I probably need to work on, whether I want to or not. But like, I listen to you sometimes in your generosity in being able to, and I think it's real, right? But I, you know, Yeah, I just need to work on that. Enough said.
I want to thank you and Isaac for being demonstrative of what reconciliation and forgiveness look like. So here's the true meaning of what everybody been alluding to. But when you get the firsthand experience of what we hear today and the takeaway, how you reach that point, and this is what reconciliation and forgiveness look like. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank y'all for opening your hearts and for bringing your families to
Yeah.
this table to share as well. I mean, if any of the family members want to speak, I'd love to hear from y'all as well. Mama, whoo, Queen
Yeah.
Mother,
You're right.
you're a goddess of persistence.
I want to say something.
Excuse me, I made 91. Last- I never had a surgery. I've never been real sick. I'm hoarse now.
Mm-hmm. Put that a little closer, clearly, so everybody can hear you, because everybody wants to hear you.
But one thing, I always had faith.
Yeah.
I didn't care what nobody said. I know it's somebody over all of us.
Yeah.
And it didn't take nothing but go on my knees and I said, my son did it. I want him to get some time, but if he didn't do it, I said, Lord, free him. Yeah. And I put out a lot of money, and it didn't free him. But when he got freed, I didn't put out a nickel.
Yeah. Do you hear that? So, yeah, praying a lot, keeping your faith, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to say, first of all, Isaac, you're a much bigger person than I am. Just even hearing the story, I know you've lived with the story a lot longer than I have, but I can't hear it without being filled with rage, as you know. But I do want to ask, well, actually, there's kind of two questions. One was, and maybe you don't want to, share all the details of this, but why did they pick you to, why did they target you? And have there been any consequences to the people that have, the detectives or anybody who wrong, or the people that beat you in interrogation? Has there been any accountability?
No, it hadn't been any accountability. And the thing about it, Judge Lori White, who was my attorney at the time, she filed a lawsuit for the wrongly conviction. And at that time, the state of Louisiana, we were suing Dave Patterson, Detective John Dillman, and Harry Connick, along with the state of Louisiana, and they were all immune to malicious prosecution, meaning that they could not be sued. And all they can do is just give me my freedom. And I think I'm still satisfied to an extent because they use my case to come in with the law, to whereas now they have to start paying people for being wrongly convicted. And I have a friend just walked over there, Archie Williams. Y'all probably seen him on American Got Talent. He did 37 years for a crime he didn't commit. Right. And people like him and Pug, now they can get paid, and I'm glad of that. Even though I didn't get a nickel, but I'm satisfied to an extent because they now they got to pay people when they do them that. Even though money, I don't think it would measure up to the time being spent in prison.
Yeah.
Excuse
There,
me.
hold on just one sec. There was also, Lori White also did bring Dave Pattison up on charges about 12 years later, I think it was. And it was the first ever disciplinary hearing because before that, prosecutors were absolutely exempt from any kind of prosecution. And it was, they ended up, it was like a, a panel of like, I think it was like one lawyer and two business people or something. And they decided he hadn't done anything wrong, okay. But that was the first time that had ever happened. The other thing is John Dillman, who, honest to God, has a long, very checkered past in this state and went on to actually write a bunch of crime novels, I think, that probably are based on this craziness. Nancy and I just had a conversation with a lawyer who is representing somebody filing a civil suit against him. And I think that's the first time that's happened, that he's got a civil suit. He's been deposed, and what this lawyer said is he is pleading the fifth on everything. He knows he's screwed. So he may end up being convicted in a civil suit. Yeah, but no criminal charges. You what? Yeah.
Well, I'm Burnell Jalou. I've been wrongfully convicted. I've been locked up 28 years.
Jesus.
And I got two questions. One is, if you would have got the money, how much is enough?
Hold on, say that again.
If you would have been, you got the money, if they would receive the money, how much is enough?
How much is enough? It's not. I mean, you can't compare it. I mean, the money, we know that money is not everything, but it's the most important thing. So we still need it whether we want it or not. But I mean, it would have helped a little bit, but it wouldn't have solved what happened to me, because it's the same thing with you and your two co-defendants. Y'all, it's three of them over there that was on a case together, and they did 28 years for a crime they didn't commit.
Right.
And they've been released. And so, I mean, it don't measure up.
And my other question was, y'all some amazing people, but I wonder how you deal with that. I can't never be you. Patrick Quinn, the judge, Harry Conning, and the DA, Julia Parker. If I see one of them people here, I'm gonna have a job kick them. How you do that?
Yeah. I think, and I think I do it because, like I said, the way I was raised, my mom is very spiritual, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want Clara Lee coming after you drop me. No, I want to share with y'all that I'm an artist, so I come at this stuff from the art realm. But we met through the graduates. We met an organization in Chicago called the Chicago Torture Memorial, and it is all about. There was a police officer similar to the police officers and the system that you encountered here in New Orleans, in Chicago, that tortured Black and brown, mostly men, in Chicago for years, and they are being held accountable for their actions. And I just want to share, sometimes we need to see the model of accountability somewhere else before we can manifest it here. And I very strongly believe that, we talked earlier about the violence in our streets. The violence in our streets is this unhealed, unaccounted for trauma, and the people that look like me that have gotten away with it for centuries in this city. And I just want to encourage us to not accept, yes, to forgive, but to go past from the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yep.
Right? Forgive, yes, for our hearts and for our spirits, but for the total wealth of our entire city, our entire community, our entire country, we have to get to reconciliation and accountability and being accountable for the actions. And I just want to offer that there's back to the kind of art realm, the historic New Orleans collection is actually doing an exhibit coming up next year about the old OPP and what all happened there. And I would like to invite if any of you who experienced that place would like to share your stories of what you experienced there, I would like to encourage not to be exploitative of the harm that you went through, but to in the interest of servicing truth and coming to accountability for what happened. Because I'm assuming that I'm not sure. Is the 7th floor that you spoke about, was that at OPP or was that at Charity?
OPP.
That was at OPP. Yeah. So I would love to talk to you more about that. And yeah, and my final question is super technical. And if y'all don't want to go into it now, great. But I don't know what Brady material is.
Well, Brady material is withheld in exculpatory materials. That would have the Brady claim came in at. They held back evidence that would have probably changed it probably would have changed whatever they was trying to fight for. First degree murder, second degree murder, manslaughter. With the Brady material, it would have gave the jury something else to think about. Yeah. And so with them withheld in that, which they were supposed to present that to the defense attorney, and they didn't. And Dave Patterson lied again. He said that the material was offered to my defense attorney. He claimed that it was offered to them. And the reason why he said that was because he knew that the attorney was dead. He died. But I had 2 attorneys, thank God. And one got put out the courtroom because he was actually trying to fight for me. And when he found out that Dave Patterson was saying that the evidence was offered to them, he got up and told him. He said, "Oh no, I was one of the attorneys on that case. So you saying that the evidence was offered? It was not offered to us. I knew nothing about that." And he got up and cleaned that up.
And when we met with him, it was very interesting. One of the first things he wanted to get, it seemed like, out was that he had a pattern of kind of working with defense lawyers where they all knew he would just keep his pile of material on the corner of his desk and they could come by at any point and look at it. That's what he said to us. Patterson? Yeah. In fact, he wrote me a letter about 3 or 4. I literally went to my office. It was very unnerving, and wrote me a 5-page letter. I mean, a 5-page letter that was somewhere in there was kind of a cease and desist, but it started with, "I wish you hadn't read the book. I wish you had talked to me first." And then he went literally through. It was the most bizarre thing because he went through that his father was a physician, that they voted for John Kennedy, that he's a good guy, and he's doing, and 3 or 4 times he mentioned that he had cancer. I mean, it was like every little angle to try to be like, "I'm not an asshole. What have you done here?" And then somewhere sprinkled in was "and I hope you'll do the right thing," though he didn't come right out and threaten it. But this went on, honest to God, for 5 pages. And then what he had compiled was a whole pile of articles about Isaac that were fairly, demeaning and, like what happened after he got out of jail, as if we would write a book and I wouldn't have looked at any of that. I mean, it was bizarre. I obviously didn't get back to him. Yeah.
I just wanted to add that OG, you're definitely my hero. I just wanted to put that out there. Mom, godmother, goddess, you're my hero. Burnell, Kunta, my daddy, my mama, Fox, all the other old heads that were incarcerated for however many time, and y'all was so resilient, y'all never folded. I also want to say thank you, Amy and Nancy. I appreciate y'all above anything because y'all made it possible for me as a young black man, young brother, to just to see like, okay, change is real. It can happen. Like y'all give me a lot of hope. Like, I appreciate y'all for everything. Like, I needed this. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is in reference to Burnell asked the question, how much is enough for compensation? And I just had the conversation with Kuta not too long ago about the legislation just passed a law that give a cap on wrongful conviction. It's a 10-year cap that they have awarded $400,000. Now, in any case that exceeds 10 years, you don't get compensated for those years. Now, it's a case that just got released a couple of days ago, and y'all had heard his testimony yesterday. Who was here? It was Raymond
Yep.
Flame. He did 39 years. Now, the state would only pay him for 10 years. So what happened to the 29 years that the taxpayers paid him money? But when Burnell asked the question, I had just talked to his associate concerning that how much is enough. And even with Isaac Knapper's situation, I don't know if he ever appealed for the application for compensation, but even when the law came into effect, you should have still been entitled to something, what you said momentarily. Every little bit helped, even though we know, the size of a mustard seed, the faith that moved us to where we are today. But something is better than none, but we just not gonna settle for less. This is why the struggle continues as we moving in the direction we are right now today. And I still thank you all for showing what reconciling and forgiveness look like with wrongful conviction. And how much is enough? That was the price is right question right there. Yeah. So it ain't nothing you can give me for the horror.
Right.
That I suffered inside, and even with the breaking of a family through those years that we don't know what happened in between, the separation. So that's something how to be compensated. And even with the years that your family gave you money, what the state providing, they really didn't give you enough because what your family and friends sent you while you was incarcerated, that sum up to really what my family and them tax, you just paid back the taxes, what they paid also.
Yeah.
All right, I don't have a question, but I want to say this. When y'all reached out to Jerry, me and him was talking about it. And Amy, I thought that was crazy. I told Jerry, I was like, Jerry, how you feel about it? He said, man, I don't know. I said, how your mama feel about it? And at that time, he hadn't told her. And I just thought that was crazy because just that angle, I could have never imagined it. But to see y'all on stage now and to write the book and to see how that process went because I'm behind the scene, but I really thought it was crazy.
We've got a couple of questions on Zoom.
I think you were not the only one. Let me tell you, when people, I remember when I was planning for the trip and, I think people also didn't know on our end. I didn't tell a lot of people, but it's like, oh, and then we're going to go to Angola. It was kind of crazy, right? The whole thing was kind of crazy. Yeah.
So we've got some comments. LL, who's on Zoom, says, thank you both so much for sharing this remarkable and powerful journey. Juanita Kyle up in Minnesota, thank you, Isaac and Amy. This was so powerful. I feel rage, anger towards a criminal injustice system. I've served 30 years as a public defender in Minnesota, but will take to heart things I've learned in this conference. Isaac's words about not feeling rage and anger because it does nothing to a person responsible for the rage, and to take this rage and anger to the legislature and lobby for positive change. Thank you. Yep. And then James writes, we serve an amazing God, healing and restoration and redemption. Thank you, everyone.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We gotta go big or go home. We're down to the gold. Never been a better time.